I'm really thrilled that we have the panel that we have today. First of all, let me say that I am completely on board with the fact that Gen AI and AI is going to radically change the way we think, we work, and we do business. I also think, and I was asked in another presentation from last week, who would win out, machine or humanity when it comes to the future of Gen AI? And what do you think I said? Any takers? Machine or humanity? How many people feel that, oh my goodness, these incredible clinicians, research experts, scientists, chief technology officers, they do a lot of different things, are going to be replaced by a machine? Raise your hand. Thank God, very few. I actually will share with you a thought, and we're going to explore that a little bit in this panel. I think that the data that is being mined and the patterns that are being discovered and the insights that will come forward from AI are only possible through the cognitively sharp human being. What questions we ask, how we ask those questions, the thoughtfulness around framing what information is needed, and, very important, the empathy of which we interpret these data. That's what will separate us from the machine itself. Humanity, I do believe, will win out. And if you're here because you're an engineer, and you think that this is a topic you need to know about, I'd have to say that the four people who will sit on this panel will illuminate direction. I've had the privilege of speaking to them. Some I've known, like Elliot, for a few years now. Others I've met. I've had a chance to study their background. These are people who are practically creating the system. And it's very important that we have the conversation we're about to have. Because, in fact, we're not talking about what this is going to look like in 2 or 3 years. We're going to explore what this is going to look like this afternoon, tomorrow, and the day after. So I want to welcome our panelists here. I'm going to invite them up by alphabetical order of their first name. Elliot, are you ready? This is Dr. Elliot Goodman, and as you can see from your sheets here, good to see you, Elliot, always. Grab a chair. Anyone, pick it up. You first come, first serve.
Okay, go to the right. No, that doesn't describe my quality.
Elliot is a surgeon, but he's also a teacher of surgeons. And he's also looking at AI in the context of how do we use this as a training tool, as a learning tool, as an application tool. Next, I'd like to invite Gerald Kelly. And Gerald is from the hometown, yes. Right? Dr. Kelly, first of all, is an internist. He's a primary care physician. He's obviously dedicated a great deal of his career to preventing illness, but he's expanded on that career. He's actually the Chief Technology Officer, Chief Information Officer, and Chief Technology Officer here at Stony Brook University Hospital, which is really an academic medical center and a primary care center. Gerald, thank you. And now we have Dr. Jamie Hirsch. Let me tell you a little bit about Jamie. Jamie has multiple roles at Northwell Health. And you heard earlier today that Northwell Health is probably one of the region's largest hospital systems. Is that correct? You're not going to debate me on that.
It's a fact.
It's okay, there we go. We had one of our speakers this morning actually, even though he's on Stony Brook's home territory, he decided to rub it in and just say, now Northwell is bigger.
Size is not always best.
Okay, but we'll have another debate on another forum. But thank you very much for that. So Jamie is he's the Associate Vice President of Clinical Digital Solutions. He's a nephrologist And nephrology plays a very critical role in terms of not just our kidney health. Nephrologists are, by their very nature, scientists. They are looking at human biology, and in this case, in terms of his role, in terms of clinical solutions, he's also looking at patterns to apply so that we can sustain and save people's lives. Jamie, thank you so much for representing Northwell, the largest health system in the region. I wanted to make sure. I was told he came out, but while we were in the hallway green room, he said, look, it's really important to Northwell that we know it's the largest. Okay. And on sabbatical right now, so we're very fortunate to have Nevenka, Dimitrova. Dr. Dimitrova, Nevenka, is a visiting computational oncologist advisor at Memorial Sloan Kettering. She's really transversed the world of big enterprises and information. She's been with Philips. She was previously really setting up, I think it was the translational medicine for oncology at GSK, really one of the world's largest biopharmaceutical companies. I'm sorry? And the oldest. Northwell take that. And so we're very privileged to have you here. Thank you so much. Now, who am I? Thank you. Who am I? I am your moderator, obviously. Hopefully I've gotten you awake with a chuckle or two. Aside from my role as chair of Global Health and Purpose at Fin Partners, I'm editor-in-chief of a large digital health news platform called Nevenka with a K. Life, it has anywhere, depending on the year, about 300,000 to 1 million readers. I've been writing about AI from the days it was called machine learning. So it's about 15 years ago. I told the panel, people would say to me, what's big data? And I would tell them a very important definition. I hope you'll remember this. It's worth the price of admission. Big data is a lot of data. Right? It's a lot of data that we don't know what to do with. And so machine learning meant we asked somebody who was a programmer to put it into a computer so we could look at the big data on a computer and maybe find patterns. Augmented intelligence, I use purposely the word augmented intelligence. I don't think intelligence can be artificial. I really don't. I think we're starting from insights or information that we find valuable. So we're talking about augmented intelligence. Ultimately, the information is an extension of us. So welcome to this panel. Please give them a hand. So I'm gonna, let's see if this is on.
It's on.
It's on, very good. I'm gonna start off with I think, a very important question, because all of you are involved in the sciences, all of you are involved in patient care. Obviously, your position, your responsibility has enabled you to morph out of just seeing patients or sitting in the laboratory day in and day out. I'd like to start with Elliot and just work across and ask you a very simple question, few sentence answer. Aside from my introduction, what are you doing in the system in terms of information? Explain to people what you do when you're not here.
Okay, so for 25 plus years, I was what we call a cutting surgeon. I would see patients,
Have to bring it closer.
and operate. But in the last couple of years, we've been more interested in the bigger picture, trying to use data to improve patient outcomes and to improve the way in which we train surgical residents to become safe surgeons and how we educate medical students. And that interest has spanned artificial intelligence and virtual reality. And in fact, I feel a little bit like an imposter. I mean, not only that I'm just a dumb surgeon these days.
Don't believe him. He's a very brilliant surgeon. Whenever anybody says I'm just a dumb surgeon, don't play poker with him.
But what I'm really interested in now is virtual reality and the ability to use technology to take 2D images, make them 3D, manipulate them, all with the idea of teaching students and residents anatomy more effectively, and also to see whether we can use that added layer of information to make better decisions clinically. And in fact, we're running a research protocol using virtual reality to look at patients with pancreatic cancer and to determine whether they're curable. The only cure for pancreatic cancer is surgery. And can you use virtual reality to figure out whether a patient should go to the operating room or not for a shot at cure, or whether unfortunately they'll be okay.
Gerald?
Hi, everybody. I'm Gerald Kelly. I am the Chief Information Officer at Stony Brook Medicine and a health system.
Just move the mic a little bit.
I'm both excited and terrified about this topic at the same time because my role mainly now is administrative. And in the past, it was always to bring the technologies, but now with AI, there's so many great ideas and so many wonderful things coming forward that it's become a challenge to make sure that our institutions are able to implement these, pick the right solutions. You know, one of the things, you know, I don't know if you know, but you know, health systems, when they have a good year, make about 1% margin, and many of them are in the red. And you know, when we invest in technologies, we have to be right most of the time. And then the other thing is we have to make sure we're right about where the data goes, that the data doesn't get out, you know, who has the data, and how you take all these wonderful technologies that look throughout the paradigm and then not analyze your system, but not necessarily put it back in a continuum. So we're making investments in population health and finance and quality with AI, but also we're also making investments in our infrastructure to try to develop an ecosystem to make sure that we can have the tools that you create and make sure it doesn't leave our organization.
So, Gerald, and we're going to move over to Jamie. You're the person they call at night and there's been a data breach, and they know that you're going to be fined by it.
Oh, I'm the person they call at night that did a big one that I look for other plan.
I'm glad this is good comment relief for you then. Thank you. Jamie?
So I think that might be Gerald's worst nightmare, because all I do is try to get data. So I'm a frustrated doctor most of the time. I sit in front of medical record systems and bang my head against the wall, and I say there's got to be a better way. And what I mostly try to do when I'm not seeing patients is think about, from the physician and the provider's perspective, you know, we're being asked to do so much work for these medical record systems. You talk about big data and all the data that goes into the system. It's coming from somewhere. And the question is, how do we take all of that data that we're asking our front staff, and now our patients as well, to enter and to put in or to generate? And how do we actually make that useful and usable and actionable to improve the quality of care of our patients? And so at Northwell, we try to develop and implement different algorithms and different kind of database-related products to be able to make improvements in healthcare, and then try to sell it to the people in the finance department to convince them that it's financially worthwhile.
That's very interesting, actually. Amazing that you do that as a clinician. I thought most of the time medical technology software companies do that, so this is amazing. For me, it's a great honor that you invited me, and I truly enjoyed all the presentations today. Every single one of them, I just think that the level of the presentations at this conference, I was here last year, but every year it seems like it grows exponentially. So it's really amazing. And I can say I'm so excited to be here because I just, the last couple of days, went through their day of OpenAI. And when you ask me, what are you doing on a day-to-day basis? I've been thinking and dreaming about automating what they're automating now for over 2 decades. So I started off as my dream was, let's create meaning from bits in digital video. So during my PhD, there were no tools, everything was opaque when you look at images and video, and as Alex explained, that by the way, he reminded me that I was on his PhD committee some years ago, so that was a great flashback. but really looking to see what would be the methods to analyze something that's just zeros and ones and come up with some very high-level concepts. I took all of that know-how because I thought I'm not going to die as a technologist. I have to help in healthcare, and I converted my very well run and an amazing group of engineers at Philips into computational biology and later on oncology informatics group. We created the first software as a service, first of a kind precision oncology software that did exactly that, Jimmy. So how do we take all these knowledge bases and information that has very solid evidence and give this to the practicing clinicians, because we saw that with the rise of genomic data, it was just impossible, especially in oncology, to know all these new mutations, which are mutations that predispose somebody to not respond to the drug, and how do we go over vast amounts of data, both in the hospital as well as on CONMED, and blend all this information, create a unique patient profile so that we can match them for clinical trials, for genomics reports, and also work with the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute to deploy their clinical pathways, but in a digital format. And the idea was, how do we scale that and how do we use AI? And I think now we are here, we sort of are arriving there, but it's one of those moments like in the Matrix movie when everything seems so slow, but actually it's moving very fast. And I sometimes think of ourselves as collectively we're all Marie Curie, and we don't know what we're dealing with. And this is my dichotomy on a day-to-day basis, because I'm utterly excited about what all these technologies are offering today.
Thank you for that. Thank you each for that. So I'm going to ask a very unusual question. Oh, it's already I'm going to first of all ask the audience again. How many of you are actively involved, truthfully, how many of you are actively involved within your enterprise in the field of AI? So a few more, I feel a little more, about 40% of you. So how many of you are really interested and you're here because you know this will probably be a game changer, and you need to be up to speed at least. You need to understand it. Okay. You've informed my question, thank you. This is audience participation time. I want to ask each of you a challenging question. You started as a scientist, you determined that you're going to go to medical school, you're going to follow a specialty, surgery, nephrology, primary care medicine, bench research. Each of you had a dream way back when. And then suddenly you made a shift and you said, I'm going to jump in both feet into the field of health and application of information. There was something going on in your thinking process that said, I'm drawn to this thing called information, data, application, insight. I'd like to ask Elliot, I'd like to start with you, and then Gerald, listen very closely to what Elliot says, because I'm going to ask you a similar question, and I'm going to ask you two different questions. So don't even pay attention if you don't want picture. Elliot, what was the shift that made you feel like, I'm a surgeon, and surgeons are, well, they're close to God, right? And you decided, well, I'm a surgeon who's close to God, and I'm going to go into information.
I think you've watched too many episodes.
And hold on to your mouth. This is like you're a wedding singer, and you have to get it close enough so that they can hear you back there.
All right, fair enough. So the thing with general surgery is that there's probably only about 6, 7, or 8 procedures that we perform on a pretty regular basis. Right? So you've been doing it for 10 years, 20 years, gets a little mundane and monotonous. So what I found was the driving factor to prevent burnout, keep me engaged, was the training aspect. In other words, when you get to the 1,000th versus the 1100th, the 1200th, hernia, gallbladder, etc. you've done, they're pretty much the same thing. The ability to train a resident or an aspiring resident, student, so that when they first work with you, they really have no idea what they're doing. And bit by bit, you train them, you take them through the procedure so that after a month, 2 months, 6 months, now they can do it themselves. That for me was the thing that got me engaged, that continued to interest me. And what I think that AI, virtual reality, can do is to improve the efficiency with which we train people and make it safer, right? Because the old adage, which was see one, do one, teach one, right, doesn't work now in a highly regulated and litigious environment. So anything that we can do in terms of simulation to make it safer to train people, and I think AI and VR helps the safety. That's a good thing, that's what interests me.
That's fascinating. Thank you for that. So you're a mentor. You really see it as an extension of your role as a mentor.
Yeah, I think so.
But you're really still in the driver's seat here. It's just an extension of your knowledge base.
Well, it's like those driving school cars, right, where you've got the student in the driver's seat, but you've also got the instructor with some control. Otherwise, accidents happen. So we're trying to prevent the accident.
During a hernia surgery, I understand. So Gerald, we were outside in the hallway and you talked about the destiny of a primary care physician. Primary care into administration. So you talked a little bit about the perspective of the senior primary care clinician. Why chief information officer? What was the journey between primary care physician and, Gerald, you're a chief information officer?
Yeah, so, for me, actually, sometimes you have formative events in your life and you don't realize when this occurred. So for me, it actually happened in 9th grade. And that's before I was a physician, a primary care physician. And the reason is that back in 1982, I had an Apple computer, okay, which is the end of my block. I lost some friends over it because I had 2 hard drives.
I saw my new.
Yes, well, I had the Apple IIe. That was, that was the thing. So what happened with me is that my father started a car company, and it's still like the 4th largest in New York City. And with a 9th grader, we were able to start a company from scratch that would compete with grades into billing and accounts receivable and things like that, all because I went to a 9th grade math class and learned how to do accounts receivable and programs and things like that. So I learned early the power of disruptors. So for me, when I started to see the EMR come out, even though I was the busiest primary care physician in Stony Brook Medicine at the time, they installed the EMR in our practice, and it was just our practice and our family practice, and they paid $400,000 for it, but nobody knew how to build it, right? They just thought it was the model you saw in the showroom, and it wasn't. So that pulled me back into it, and then over time, working with physicians, seeing the power of data and things like that, my career evolved. But that power of seeing disruptors, like we're talking about right now with AI, that's what drove me to it.
So Elliot saw himself as, he was passionate about being a mentor. The information, the innovation is an extension of his ability as a mentor. He's just sort of upping up his own sort of like superpower as a mentor and deploying AI and extended reality to really make sure he prepares another generation of great physicians. You saw early on in a way, the information power of getting things done more effectively, almost like supply chain management of time and resources.
Yes, that's accurate. And I also have another advice for the company, for the folks here. My brother, went on to run the business, even though he's the younger one, and he's a multi-millionaire now. So you know how when you say your family.
But you have in love your
So I should have stayed with business now. Okay, but I've had a great career. I've had a wonderful time doing it, and I wouldn't trade for the world.
Thank you for that. So Jamie, I said I was going to change the question like that. You come from information at a totally different place. Looking at your background. By the way, all these people welcome you to follow them on. They're all on LinkedIn. They welcome you to follow them. You can probably grab their social media handles. They'll speak to you via email. Don't hesitate afterward to sort of say, I want to stay in touch with you. Because they're just really wonderful people. And Jamie, after you completed your BA, you sort of like almost went on dual track simultaneously. You have this medicine track, and you also have this information track. So you knew way back when, somehow or another, you had one of those magic 8 balls, and you asked, should I do medicine or information? And you turned it over and it says, do both. So you knew way back when that you were going to combine both. A lot of these people are trying to make a decision. How many of you are engineers, by the way? Fantastic. I love IEEE, by the way. And I love Stony Brook CEWIT department. It's great. So if you're an engineer, you're A+ in my book. So a lot of these people are engineers. Only 40% of them are really involved in the AI field. 100% of them understand it's going to be career changing. Somehow or another, you knew during medical school, information was going to be career changing for you as a future physician. What was going on in your head when you came home and told your parents, oh, I'm going to get a master's also in this?
Just to set the record straight a little bit. So in medical school, I thought I was going to be an academic bioethicist. That was my career track. And I like liberal arts. I did a lot of writing in college. I did philosophy classes, and I thought I'd be an academic and study bioethics and talk about end-of-life care and dialysis and all those other complex questions of justice. And then I got to, when you're in medical school, you think that you, especially the last year of medical school, you think you have it all figured it out, you know what it's like to be a doctor, and then, it's kind of like that, every time you start again. So you graduate medical school, and then you're back to being like that freshman again, that first year intern, and you have no idea what's going on. And so that was me walking through the halls of the hospital as a newly minted physician, and also newly married. And my wife, she's a systems engineer by training and a management consultant. So I blame her for this career change. So she and I, our nighttime conversations, I'd come home at the end of the day and we would talk about how dysfunctional the hospitals are and how they don't work from a system level. And and I think as a physician, again, as I said, we spend so much time in front of a computer, right? So I'm walking through the halls of the hospital, I'm walking through the ICU, and I see patient after patient after patient, and every patient's being treated differently. And then you sit down and you're sitting at computers and you're entering all this information, all these systems. And this is my nighttime fodder and conversation with my systems engineer wife, and and she's like, her mind is just blowing. What is going on in healthcare? And it kind of, I think, slowly dawned upon me that there's this opportunity to have this one-on-one interaction and relationship with patients, which I still have today. A third of my time I spend in direct patient care. But then I can also spend time, thinking about the systems problems and how do we improve the quality of care across hundreds, thousands, or maybe even millions of patients by affecting the systems and the processes of care. And clearly, logically, the most impactful way I could do it was through these computer systems because that's what I, as a physician, interact with all the time. I was fortunate enough to also be at an institution at Columbia University that has a very strong informatics department. So at the time, still kind of call it informatics, now we call it digital health or whatever we call it, but it's informatics at its core. And the Department of Biomedical Informatics at Columbia has engineers, and it has physicians, and it has scientists, and it was this really wonderful academic milieu where I was able to really kind of embed myself in there and really get training, excellent training of learning about this interdisciplinary field of informatics, which is an amazing academic department. What's amazing even more about it is that you're not just writing articles that go on shelves, you're not just writing these academic treatises, you're actually directly impacting patient care. You can study that, you can show the impact, that's incredibly important. But it's not, I don't know if my article doesn't get read, okay, whatever, but like you can actually put it into practice. We can actually change the care that we deliver across thousands, and at Northwell Health, the biggest health system in New York, we could actually impact the care of many, many patients, which is really wonderful.
So now I'm changing the question for you,
Okay.
but it's an adaptation of the question. So you probably, while you were doing your PhD program, saw yourself as either sort of a bench scientist, directing teams, looking at unmet medical needs, and trying to figure out what molecules could be manipulated in some way, shape, or form, or created or adapted into treatments. At what point in the journey did you say, physically, this is kind of impossible, right? It's, no matter how many of you there are in the room, no matter how brilliant each of you are in that room, it won't be enough to move the dial fast enough to save people's lives. And while you're thinking of that, I just want to say something to our participants here. I travel the world and I meet with startup CEOs in the Gen AI and AI areas all around the world. In a week and a half, I'm in Israel speaking to the ML Israel conference. So I speak to people all the time about their enterprises. And in many cases, many of them are engineers, of course, and they're looking to develop something that they think will be fiscally advantageous. In other words, investors will be excited, will put money into the venture, and often when I speak to them, their desire to look at health stems from a personal story. A parent had diabetes, a parent or someone close to them died from cancer. Something happened in their trajectory that all of a sudden made them, much like Elliot and Gerald and Jamie, and I'm sure we're going here in just a second, something happened in their life, and they took their talent, their educational background, and made a target shift. Let me just say in this country, where we spend about 19% of our GDP on health, think about that, 19% of our GDP on health, and in this country, we live 10 years less than in countries like Germany or France or Japan or Hong Kong or China. They live 10 years longer, and they spend somewhere between 6% and 9% of GDP on health. Something is amiss, and you could say the hospital care is wrong. Part of it is when I speak to people in Hong Kong, they have a very developed information system. Their electronic medical records actually work well for the patient and the doctor. So if you're an engineer and you're saying, what's my next job going to be? Or where will I apply for my next job? At the beginning of the evolution of the field, one, I think you should be here at Stony Brook studying, right, engineering and participating in the CEWIT program. That's a great start if you're from the local area. Or you should be listening closely to the answers that we're getting, because what I'm hearing is it's a very personal journey. The technology is always the technology. The application of the human being in the technology is the differentiating factor. So back to you now. If we can time to think about that. You went into the room, a whole bunch of eager minds in a sterilized room. You're going to look at a lot of different stuff. You're going to sit at computer terminals, and suddenly you say, now, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to create a global system. When you were at GSK, I'm going to create a global system that starts to mine data so that we can discover treatments for deadly cancers faster. What was going on in your head at that moment?
So that's an amazing question. And for me, the aha moment was we have done all the R&D for genomics software for practicing clinical pathologists because things were shifting very quickly. So this is around 2016. And we are sitting at a molecular tumor board with some pretty amazing top oncologists in this country. And then they come with the microscope. And then they ask, what about the scan, the radiology? Did anybody bring it? Oh, it's on film, it's 2 floors down. And I'm thinking, you know, we have here billions of points of data that we just crunched, and we're giving you some very distilled information, but you need the patient context in order to make use of this information, because now we don't know which drugs was that patient on. I'm sure my colleagues have all been against this wall. There is a ton of documents that are not processed. The bits and pieces of information are in the different specialties. As a patient, you're very lucky if somebody remembers everything about you when they're in that tumor board. And now imagine stage 4 cancer, pancreatic cancer. You know, it's such a deadly, devastating disease. And the 5% survival, 5-year survival rate as a patient, you know, it's pretty daunting. So that's what pushed me on this side to say, okay, right now we can use all the clinical pathways, we can put them in production, but long term, and that long term becomes actually today, because we do have visual transformers, we do have, as Carlos was explaining earlier today, we do have all the technologies for parsing these PDF documents, which are supposedly digital, but they are not readable, as he pointed out. So I wanted to amalgamate all that information into a digital retrievable patient journey, so that the clinician can have a true decision support. And to me, that notion of clinical decision support, we've been talking about it for decades. I think now we're at the point where it can be truly practiced. And I have to add, the clinician should, all of these technologies should just help the clinician liberate their time so they can do the thinking and not entering data into whatever clinical system that is. Because I always remember this story, it's from Jim Watson, the DNA structure, Watson-Crick. And his conversation with his colleague Crick, when they read the paper from Linus Pauling, who at the time said, oh, the structure of DNA is triple helix. And then Crick was like, oh, okay, we've lost the game, he's going to win the Nobel Prize, and he discovered the structure. And then Watson said, just forget it, you know, organisms duplicate and they don't triplicate. So that's such a human insight that's so difficult for AI to know. So a few months ago, I was just poking ChatGPT and trying to see how deep, how accurate is that knowledge, because for nice conversations and writing thank you notes and so on, it was great. It was about cancer vaccine, and it told me that Merck has this cancer vaccine, M7824, which is a bispecific. It's actually a TGF-beta plus checkpoint inhibitor, and it thought it's a cancer vaccine, and it's an antibody. So it knew many of the details, but it was missing some of the middle layer, high-level information that the clinician would never miss. So I think there is a lot for both the biological as well as the digital human species, because I think we're going to change that tree of life to, at the root, to have, this is the biological life and this is the artificial life right now. All of those are written differently, they're all biological. So, but the most distinguishing characteristic will be that insight and making judgment. And just like I think Lloyd pointed out this morning, the model wasn't very wrong. It was just off by a few hours, and also the magnitude of the prediction. And imagine if you're that patient and you're in ICU and an AI model is trying to decide what to do with you, and you have a margin of error. So.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask the audience once again a quick question. Have you ever worked on a project? You wanted to go to your boss and get your boss's buy-in on the project, and you walk in, you have PowerPoint with background research, and your boss says, nah. Has that ever happened to you before? Yeah, everybody's sort of like, yeah. So I have a premise. I'm going to throw it out to a panel right now. Here's my premise. They're nervous. Are you nervous, Elliot? Right. He's a surgeon. They're always, even if they're nervous, they don't show it. Culture crushes innovation. So I wanted to ask you, you are pursuing new areas within mega health institutions. Lead world-class health institutions. Each of you sits in one of this nation's, it happens to be New York Metro, but actually they happen to be some of the world's greatest institutions of care. What's the real decision-making factor in terms of pushing the envelope on information technology? Is it the force of the person who suggests we're going to use AI to train surgeons so that they're better and produce better outcomes? Is it the force of the idea, the belief of the outcome? Or is it really the champion of the idea and their belief in the individual to make the technology, the investment in the technology, play out for the institution? Do they shrug their shoulders and say, oh, AI? Insert, yeah, sure, of course, that makes perfectly good sense, Elliot. Why don't you go do that? Here's $1 million. You know, or do they say, Gerald, yeah, we need to do this, this, and this to be more effective and reimbursable? Sure, whatever you need, write a check. So I wanted to ask you, Elliot, you've been involved in this area for quite some time. Is it the technology that enchants them, or is it the person who's championing the technology?
I think tough question. I think that surgeons are inherently quite conservative. I think that they're quite superstitious. So in terms of new technology, you've got to really prove it to get them to change. If you're suggesting a change that is really central to how they treat patients or do a particular procedure. And in a highly regulated environment where complication rates attract, the number of times you take a patient back to the operating room, your operative mortality, the number of units of blood that your patients are transfused are very carefully watched by departmental chairs by the Department of Health, etc. You've got to really prove to the surgeon that this is in the patient's best interest, also in their own best interest. And sometimes the interests are not 100% aligned. I also think that sometimes peer group pressure helps, because you don't want to be seen as too reactionary. You don't want to be sort of called out as having inferior outcomes. And so sometimes if you're not an early adopter, if you see everybody else doing it, somehow you perceive that you're falling behind the competition, however friendly it might be, internally or externally, then that sometimes will motivate you to make a
So you're really pointing to the human aspect of the decision to commit to AI or VR more than the technology as it is proven as, gee, what are they doing at Northwell? If Northwell's doing it, we better do it too.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is self-centered.
So it's all about Northwell. Yeah, Jamie's going to say it's all about us. Okay. That was very good. Now, Gerald, you're another person who's sitting there around that table where someone's coming in and says, look, nephrology involves a lot of data, and we've got to determine, do we intervene on this patient? Do we put them on the transplant list? What's the game plan? You're sitting there listening to somebody who wants to be a bioethicist make their case to invest a lot of money in the system. Is it the person? Is it the Jamie? Or is it the technology?
I think it's all of the above. We've seen it come through many ways, but the most important thing is it has to solve a problem for the organization. And we also look at a lot of other factors like how it's going to be implemented, who's going to love the program, who's going to take care of it. Because even with AI, there'll be times that things need to be trained better. And I think that's really important to make sure that it's a package of things like where does the data go, who's going to store it, who has access to it, what kind of benefit we're going to get. And then of course it does also come out to our ROI on the investment too. That's definitely a factor. One of the things that we learned when we were starting our analytics platform is now everybody uses Tableau dashboards, and it's wonderful and maybe beautiful, beautiful dashboards, was that we would have people come in and say, if I only had a Tableau dashboard, it would show me everything this way. And we would invest and make these dashboards, and eventually we made a Tableau dashboard to figure out who wasn't using their Tableau dashboard, right? And then we kind of said, gee, maybe that person's not a really good investable product in the future. So what I think really it comes down to is there's sometimes things that are industry leading, sometimes there's peer pressure, but for the most part it has to solve a problem, they have to prove their case, they're going to bring in reliable data, but we also have to have confidence in the folks that bring this stuff to us, that they can deliver it, and also that they have a clear plan and they're a solid company.
So you agreed with that, you brought in two other factors. The distinct defined need, and is this costing us money or giving us some form of return on investment? But you also really point to the human factor for success or failure. So Jamie, I sense that in your department, you were the champion, you were the pioneer who sort of was looking at all this and information, your fascination. Jamie, I think, wants to be you. He wants to be an engineer, but he's stuck with his MD degree. But so your wife's an engineer at Airport, so you married an engineer. Is that good? Does that count, everybody? If you marry an engineer, does that make you a little bit of an engineer? What do you think? If you agree that it does, clap. It's kind of lukewarm, that clap, by the way. Okay. So tell us.
Engineers also.
You can tell your wife when you got her and clap for her. How's that? Okay. So, human or machine? What's the decision-making factor when you walk in and say you want to do something?
So I'll piggyback on Gerald. I think a little bit of both. I think you definitely have to be understanding of the problem to be solved. And we made that mistake numerous times early on in getting overly enamored by the technology or by building this model, or maybe it was something that I, as a single clinician, saw as a problem because it bothered me, and I decided to have my team work on it. But it wasn't really solving a problem of anyone beyond me. Or maybe it would solve a problem, but it's not a priority. Remember, every health system has dozens or hundreds of problems to be solved. So in theory, the problem that I'm trying to solve may be important objectively, and it just may be priority number 97, and they're never going to get to it. And so really having a bit of humility and understanding the stakeholders, the people that are going to be using the product, and understanding what their problems are, and then building around their problems or helping solve their problems. I mean, we do a lot of internal development, but we also talk to vendors, and sometimes we'll have a vendor trying to tell us about, this is going to solve problem X of yours, and we'll say, that's not really a problem of ours, we're okay with that. But, well, what is your problem? We'll solve the next day. And they're like, well, our model will solve that one, and they'll solve the next one too. And so you kind of lose the audience there. And so I think having certainly a bit of humility, coming into talking to the stakeholders, really understanding and embedding yourself in their world and understanding their problem. I have a few engineers on my team, and I work very closely with Theo Zanos, who's I guess, kind of an engineer, right? You are? Yes. We'll call you an engineer. You're a researcher, I don't know. You're a neural engineer, right? So, I work very closely with engineers and data scientists on my team, and most of them don't have clinical backgrounds, but they're smart enough to know that they need to really understand the domain and work with the people that are on the front lines to understand the problems and to be able to build and design solutions that really are addressing the needs of the people that actually have to interact with these systems. Because at the end of the day, we have decision support tools that have been around in healthcare for dozens of years, but they're largely ineffective. And if you look at any academic publication around decision support in the informatics world, it's the success of how many decision support alerts or how many decision support notifications did we effectively removed because it's so disruptive to clinical workflows. And so if we just had, we changed the decision support logic from a simple rule-based to an AI-based, but the effect is the same, we're gonna lose the audience, we're gonna lose our doctors and our clinicians and our nurses because they're not going to trust it, they're not going to believe it. And so I think there's a discerning audience that you need to kind of prove the value and the worth of what you're building, and it can't just be you as an engineer, as a technologist, trying to shove it down their throats. It's really this kind of, it has to be in collaboration and one of humility as well.
I saw Gerald nodding, so it sounds like maybe you're voting for humanity here.
It's an ethicist, yes.
Yes. So then, one last question. You started as a scientist. You leaped into information to propel science forward. Very quick answer now. What do you think is driving the decision? You would go into whether it was Philips or Glaxo, now on your sabbatical at Memorial Sloan Kettering, and you're saying, look, I think we should invest in this tool, this application of a tool, or build out this system. Are they thinking about it in terms of, yes, we can do that system, it's missing here, or we trust you and your wisdom and your knowledge, okay, let's go forward. At Glaxo, we were building a global team around precision medicine, translational medicine. Was it someone who said, we need to build a global team around translational medicine, or a team said, we've got to go this way?
It's a very interesting question, and I can talk the whole afternoon about it, unfortunately. So I would say when I went to Glaxo, and just like here, companies, they have petabytes and petabytes worth of data, and many individual applications, which decision support for life sciences and drug discovery. Of course, we had AlphaFold and so on. But somehow there was peer pressure, as Elliot would say, peer pressure to, among all of the pharmaceutical companies, how do we advance so that we don't spend $1 billion on the next drug in 8 years, but we can accelerate this. And part of this was not about new algorithms and doing something new, because we had an amazing AI group at Glaxo, a lot of machine learning people, and it was about the data and how we gather the data and the right data to train these models and then deploy them in production. So I think that's probably the frontier, and if we think that these foundational models are gonna, eventually prevail, I think there is some human factor, as Jamie said, and more training, as Gerald said, that we need to apply all together with a lot of validation, human judgment, and having ways to evaluate AI before any deployment, and also consider the ethics of doing so.
So I've heard that guess what, folks? You've answered the question in a way, humanity or machine. I think we can agree humanity wins this round of the debate. So last quick question, one word answer. One word answer. We're worried already about the one word. How many of you are involved in the health sciences? Raise your hand. Okay, about 40%. How many of you are interested in health sciences in terms of your career? Okay, that's okay. So the question I have is, Elliot, you were a surgeon. Gerald, you were a primary care physician. Jamie, you were a nephrologist. Nevenka, you were a scientist. You got involved in information or informatics or AI as sort of a, you could say, almost like a second adjunct career. And it became part of your lives. It wasn't how the journey began. It was kind of like how it morphed. So my question is a career question for our audience. Can someone who's not in health, who's passionate about the discipline, but has background potentially in engineering and AI, make the transition into the health sector based on the needs? Yes or no?
Yes.
100%, we're all in the healthcare business, whether we know it or not, just like the famous quote from,
For me?
no, who's the great investor? That GE didn't know they were invested in a healthcare company.
Jack Welch.
Jack Welch, exactly right. So really, we're all part of it, and whether or not you're working on the finance part, or the registration part, or you're just a consumer, we're all part of it.
You got it. Jamie, what do you think? Yes or no?
Definitely yes. In Northwell, we have 40,000 clinicians. We have a dearth of engineers and technologists. And I hire on my team. I don't hire any physicians. I hire only data scientists and engineers. And you don't need any domain knowledge. As long as you have curiosity and humility, you'll pick that up.
Awesome. What do you think? Can people make the
I'm a convert, so I definitely think it's possible. It's just about your patience and how much time you think it will take to come up to a certain level. And I just have to say, many people in this interdisciplinary field of applied AI and healthcare feel like, oh, I'm new, I don't know about this. Everybody feels the same way. So, and especially now with the dev day of OpenAI, there are application APIs, there is information retrieval, there are just so many tools, you don't even have to be a coder to develop something new and amazing and change lives and improve outcomes, just like my colleagues are doing here.
How about an incredible round of applause for our panel?